All right, everybody. I think we're about ready to get started. Again, this is Brandon with 238 Media. Had a little time this holiday. Hope everyone's day is going well. Just wanted to do a little, some of my thoughts on what's happening within the SBC. For those who don't know, that is the Southern Baptist Convention, which I have never been affiliated with, nor do I plan to be. But there has been a lot of, lively conversation surrounding the place of very ministry-oriented participants, in particular, those of the women. And this has been a very controversial issue, as many of you have, or are aware of, rather, that it would be later or earlier in some time they decided to kick Rick Warren out of the convention. Now, for those who don't know, Rick Warren is the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Purpose-Driven Life, and he would go later on to write The Purpose-Driven Church. So he has quite memorably ingrained himself into what has become popular church planting culture. And so he is, needless to say, I don't know if you'll be offended if I say he's could be considered a type of celebrity preacher, but he definitely has status in the SBC that is paramount to a celebrity. But in all cases of the imagination, Rick Warren has received a lot of attention because of some of his stances that are not considered, very Baptist friendly. That namely being he ordained women to ministry. And by women, there are some notable female leaders on the staff. And also his successor, his wife, is a known woman's leader in preaching ministry. So I want to give some of my commentary, some of my viewpoint, because I'll be honest with you. And again, I'm nobody looking in. I really feel a lot of this reeks of political ambition, not on Rick Warren's part per se, but because Rick Warren isn't the first to do this. Even though it's hard to find, but there have been women preachers in the SBC for quite some time. And also, in the time where the Southern Baptist Convention is being challenged foundationally for who it is and for what it does and for all of those various things to an extent that hasn't been seen before, especially with the issues of sex abuse. I'm not sure if this is really what they really want to be putting their attention on. Maybe this is a red herring. And so, of course, they voted to move Warren out, and they sent some other women pastors with them. But I think as we're going to look in this video, Rick Warren has made it very clear that there are over 1,000 female ministers, not even just in pastoral leadership, but just in preaching leadership in Southern Baptist churches, that if they did this, or if they were consistent in their application of this, it would be a very big loss to the SBC. So let's take a look here, and I have a video from the 2023 Rick decision that's made. So let's take a look here.
Saddleback Church be found not in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention.
Now, friendly cooperation apparently means you're not going along with the rules. I guess that's Baptist for you just doing what you want to do, and he is commenting on that.
The Executive Committee adopted the recommendation and found that Saddleback Church is not in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention. Saddleback Church has filed an appeal with the convention within the required 30 days prior to the annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention. The question is, shall the decision of the Credentials Committee and the Executive Committee that Saddleback Church is not in cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention be sustained? Our rules apply a limitation of debate on this matter to one representative of the church in question and one representative of the Credentials Committee or the Executive Committee. The chair recognizes Rick Warren for 3 minutes, and following his conclusion, the chair will recognize the Executive Committee and Credentials Committee for 3 minutes to respond.
Now, apparently, course, I'm not Southern Baptist, so any of my Baptist friends, if you would just give me some guidance if I'm missing a piece. But after the decision has been made, there is a appeal process that they have in place, in particular for situations like this, which, I could say I think that it's a little bit of helpfulness in that because, everybody wants the right to be heard. And I imagine Rick Warren, even though he is arguably a well-established voice within the Southern Baptist movement, I'm sure he wants his day to have his viewpoint heard. So let's go a little bit further.
For 178 years, the SBC has been a blend of at least a dozen different tribes of Baptists. And if you think every Baptist thinks like you're mistaken. What we share in common is a mutual commitment to the inerrancy and the infallibility of God's Word and to the Great Commission of Jesus Christ. No one is asking any Southern Baptist to change their theology. I'm not asking you to agree with my church. I am asking you to act like a Southern Baptist.
What do you mean?
Historically, agreed to disagree on dozens of doctrines in order to share a common mission. Since Southern Baptists have always allowed disagreement on doctrines including the essential doctrines of salvation, why should this one issue cancel our fellowship? In 2013, when the Calvinists were under fire, Baptists agreed to disagree and the split was averted. Now, 10 years later,
Now, for you who don't know, there was quite a bit of controversy some time ago over the prominence of what was then growing, probably maybe the middle latter end of the Young Restless Reform movement. The Calvinists, which have historically, from what I understand, have always had a place within the SBC, but I guess with the popularity of Reformed thinking through the mediums of like Mark Driscoll and John Piper, which I don't believe they're Southern Baptists, but of course they were thought leaders within that resurgence of Reformed thought, caused probably many of the closeted Reformed folks in the SBC to come out of their Reformed closets, as it were. And this caused quite the controversy, as you would imagine. And so much to the extent that they had to have a vote because, and I don't want to get into Calvinism versus Arminianism on this video, but it did cause a kerfuffle, if you will, which kind of caused them to get over it. But what he's essentially saying, and this is very political on Warren's part, but it is a valid point, that if we did not, and he's talking about we as in them, because I'm not a Southern Baptist, did not split over Reform thinking versus Arminian thinking, why in the world should this issue be something to bother over? And what he said essentially, in that I want you to behave like a Southern Baptist, Warren is bringing to the forefront that there are many theological issues that they disagree with internally. Believe it or not, you even have continuationists among them. I remember when I was doing some banking for a retired missionary who was a Southern Baptist. He said that ever since he went in the mission field in the 70s, that a lot of the folks in foreign countries are continuationists. They speak in tongues, and that's another issue. But if tongue talking can be allowed, certainly women preaching. So he's really, he is in essence saying that why are we picking at this issue to kick my church out? And I've given my opinion before. I think because of Warren's popularity, if he wanted to run for SBC president, he could, and he probably would win. I think so. So this is like I said, I think this reeks of political ambition. To me, I think the powers in the SBC don't want it to be, because Rick Warren does represent a very vibrant, lively move towards growth. Because I'm not sure has President Mohler ever planted a church? Because Saddleback Church, he started Rick Warren. So to me, if anything is going to help the SBC, because they are the largest, but the largest doesn't mean that you are the healthiest. I'll continue.
We treat egalitarian Baptists with the same grace we showed the Calvinists. We should remove churches for all kinds of sexual sin, racial sin, financial sin, leadership sin, sins that harm the...
Now, he's hitting us more issue. He's like, because for those who don't know, they have been in the news because the SBC has sat back with their hands folded as all of this information has come back or come out of how they have knowingly, many times with recognition of removing a preacher, have not communicated to other churches of this person's sexual deviance. And even the issues that, the SBC has with race. I think that's no secret. Out of all the things they want to be focused on, y'all are really pushing at this. This is interesting.
Testimony of our convention, but the 1,928 churches with women on pastoral staff have not
1,000.
sinned. If doctrinal disagreements between Baptists are considered sin, we all get kicked out. You'll never get 100% of Baptists to agree 100% on 100% of doctrine. That's why our Constitution says that churches must closely identify, not completely identify, confession. Now, the Baptist Faith and Message is 4,032 words. Saddleback disagrees with one word. That's 99.999999999 in agreement. Isn't that close enough?
Wow.
Al Mohler, who for some reason gets to speak twice and do the rebuttals,
He is the president, though.
claims the phrase, the office of the pastor is limited to men, that also includes every staff position too, and somehow it also prevents any woman from teaching. But I was able to contact about over half of the original drafting committee of the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, and 7 of them told me Al was wrong. In fact, before the vote on the 2000 Baptist Faith and Message, even Al in his hometown newspaper said it didn't limit women from being assistant pastors. Go read it in the Courier Journal. If this precedent is set, Southern Seminary will have to change the name of the Billy Graham School, since Billy Graham trained women pastors at our global training events, and he endorsed the preaching ministry as the best preacher in the Graham family. Vote no. If this precedent is set, we'll have to rename our 2...
Ooh! See that? Did you cut that microphone off? Now, it wasn't being shady, because I understand they did say they had a 3-minute rule. And from what I understand, the previous year, he was given grace, more time. So as shady as it looked, from what I understand, it was not a intentional, but it seemed to be justification.
I'm very sorry, but the time has expired. Chair now recognizes
So we having that.
the Executive Committee, Credentials Committee, for a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the chairman of the Executive Committee, I would like to again recognize Dr. Albert Mohler as the representative of the Executive Committee to respond to the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that my position was there misrepresented, but nonetheless, it is important to state for the record that Albert Mohler does not say what the Baptist Faith and Message means. The Southern Baptist Convention says what the Baptist Faith and Message means and is quite competent to accomplish.
Now, what does that mean? See, what I pick up from this, he didn't like Brother Warren for calling his nonsense to the floor. And you got to give Albert more of this. He is smooth as they come. Look at him. He got a towel. He looked like a preacher. He looked like he's a preacher. I like that kind of character. But he's going to say that. This is so crazy. No, I know. Yes, I may have said about women preachers and this and that, but I don't write the rules. So what? I guess he's just saying, well, yeah, I'm just going to follow what's being told. I don't know. That was very, very odd. You see this lady over here. She just clapping. She's liking whatever they're talking about.
That task. In the year 2000, the words, "the office of pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture," was inserted because 30 years ago, this issue threatened to tear this denomination apart. The definition of friendly cooperation came down to the fact that that was an issue that would endanger the cooperative cohesion and faithfulness of the church, of the Southern Baptist Convention. And in particular, we look to this issue because Southern Baptists decided this is not just a matter of church polity. It is not just a matter of hermeneutics. It's a matter of biblical commitment, a commitment to the Scripture that unequivocally, we believe, limits the office of pastor to men. It is an issue of biblical authority. It is one that has actually led to the unity of the Southern Baptist Convention, as Southern Baptists have gone forward with an issue of clarity here, which has greatly made our doctrine and order a matter of unity and harmony. It is the unity and harmony of the Southern Baptist Convention that is now in
No notes.
And we're in an unusual situation. Once again, this is not a convention responsibility to offer a comprehensive verdict on the ministry of Rick Warren or Saddleback Community Church. We can thank God for every good gospel thing that is represented by that church and its ministry. It is a question about the Southern Baptist Convention and what it means for a church to be in friendly cooperation in doctrine and in order with this convention. And here we face the unusual situation in which Dr. Warren himself has made repeated statements, and the church has taken repeated actions that make very clear that it rejects the confessional understanding of the Southern Baptist Convention on this issue. This isn't a question of misunderstanding. The Credentials Committee and the Executive Committee took action based upon the actions of Saddleback Community Church in establishing a woman as a campus pastor and having women with the title of pastor to teach in the teaching role on Sunday morning, and then Pastor Warren going on to say more expansively that the church basically, and he endorses and calls for a more comprehensive egalitarianism. I'm confident that's not where the Southern Baptist Convention is going to go. I believe that it is a statement without rancor and without personal attack, without making a comprehensive verdict on a congregation that is no longer among us. We simply say that our Credentials Committee and Executive Committee have done the right thing. We need to do that.
So, this is interesting. Mohler really didn't, in my opinion, rebut anything Rick said as far as his maybe varied stances of women in ministry, but there's also an article I think that's going to be helpful. I think it's published by Yahoo. I may not have it with me. Yeah, I may not have it with me at the moment, but I think it's interesting because I guess, and I don't want to sound like I'm being repetitive, but I guess I'm thinking in my mind, all of the issues that y'all got going on right now, and I get it, you don't believe women preachers. A lot of people don't. I get that. That's not an unusual belief. But it's like, of all the churches, like, why are y'all making this such a big deal right now? Should you not be focused on the issues of sexual molestation and mistreatment that have, I think those things will tear the SBC up far faster, or just really a lot faster than any of these other things that they're worried about, just in my opinion. But again, this meeting that we just watched, it was held during, of course, their annual meeting on June 13, 2023. And in this meeting, just as a recap, they reaffirmed their decision that women will not be ordained. And it does not affirm, appoint, or employ a woman as a pastor of any kind. And of course, Al Mohler, who is the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary president, he rebutted Warren's appeal. I have to say, he was smooth. I got to give Mohler that. He was pretty smooth. He is as smooth as they come, I think. He really just, no notes. Oh, is that a flashcard? I think Warren had a flashcard and he was going at it. But the vote won because the SBC, from what I understand, requires a majority vote at 2 consecutive annual meetings to amend its constitution. And of course, they didn't get that. Now, there is a church historian by the name of Elizabeth Flowers who explains that the matter of women's roles as preachers and teachers and deacons were frequent subjects of disagreement among many of the Baptists from the denomination's beginning. Women were not allowed to serve as messengers to the SBC until 1918. When Southern Baptist women formed a national organization to support missionary work in 1888, they had to hold their first meeting in a Methodist church down the street from the Baptist church where the SBC was meeting. Until the 20th century, only men gave the missionary organization report to the SBC. Indeed, women in the U.S. did not have the right to vote at that time. So, from a time standpoint, I mean, it wasn't too unusual. The SBC's practices certainly reflected larger social norms around its gender, but its reasoning was also theological. Those beliefs formed the basis for gender hierarchy and ultimately triumphed over more moderate egalitarianism in the 20th century. Now, the article from Yahoo News goes on to say that in the 1970s, greater number of women entered the Southern Baptist seminaries, many professing a calling to the pastorate, even though most churches still refuse to ordain them. Now, what were all these women Southern Baptists? Because that's an interesting point. If all of them were in Southern Baptists, I'm not sure how this is relevant. The historian goes to say, I was a student at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in the 1980s. By that time, women were about a third of the student body, although very few women were professors. That was also a time when fundamentalists launched their takeover of the SBC. In addition to the seminaries, the convention owns numerous publishing and missionary agencies worth billions of dollars. Fundamentalists use biblical inerrancy, the idea that the Bible is without error in history, science, or theology, as a test for the theological faithfulness of its adherents. Now, I am a believer in inerrancy and those various things. Beginning with the denomination's annual conference in 1979, those fundamentalists were able to inspire messages to elect fundamentalist leaders. They claimed that moderate Baptists who did not accept inerrancy did not believe the Bible. The new leaders purged the moderates from the SBC's employment and leadership, while fundamentalists claimed that takeover was about biblical inerrancy. In reality, it was as much, if not more, about women. As historian Barry Hankins also concludes, the gender issue eventually became a central issue for Southern Baptist fundamentalists as their takeover of the SBC proceeded. A number of Southern Baptist churches had ordained women, and some had called women as pastors. Many moderate churches espouse egalitarian marital relationships, and SBC educational literature often supported women's equality in church and home. Even as fundamentalist Baptist leaders claimed their movement was about the Bible, they specifically targeted women and worked to reverse women's progress. First, in the Edenic fall, of course, is usually some of the things they're referencing here. Now, and they see use gracious submission, and of course, a future purge. But this article I think is pretty interesting, and it is entitled. The title of this video: Southern Baptist Convention votes to expel 2 churches with female pastors. Religion scholar explains how far these battles go back. So this is pretty interesting. Now, I would imagine Yahoo has some underlying gender motivations that they're trying to get going with this, because we are dealing with a liberal news source, Yahoo News. But man, I just think this is fascinating to see where this is going to go. And I wonder, because I want to say that if I'm correct, the largest church within the Southern Baptist denomination has women in ministry. So I'm very curious. I'm very curious if they're actually going to go through with this, because as Warren stated in his appeal, I think there's over 1,000 churches that, not between them pastoring and having female representation in their churches' leadership teaching ministries. Man, that's going to be a big purge. That's going to be a big purge. And you know what's interesting? Even with the women pastors' churches that they purged, I wonder, why did they pick those churches in particular? Because were those the biggest churches that the women preachers were at? I really wonder that. Were those the biggest churches? Probably not. But they were probably the most convenient churches, because what they were probably doing was just layering it so that they could have the opportunity to protect themselves. So somebody would say they were targeting Warren because they probably want to be sued. But hey, those are my thoughts for today. I'm probably going to do some more live streaming on this subject. I think it is very fascinating. to see some of the arguments that SBC has taken. But I mean, let me know what you think. Remember to share, rate, and subscribe. And as always, it's the whole gospel to the whole world by the whole church. God bless you in Jesus' name.